Are you considering selling wholesale? Lots of business owners start out by selling directly to consumers, but eventually they want to increase their profits by expanding their business. And one of the best ways to do this is by selling wholesale. This can be pretty daunting if you've never done it before. So I'm here to try and fix that. This is part 1 in a series of 2 wholesale videos. And in this video, we're going to talk about what is wholesale selling, what are the benefits of selling wholesale? Should you sell wholesale? We're going to look at a couple potential pain points, pricing, and then 5 ways of selling wholesale. Consider this your everything you need to know to start selling wholesale guide. So who am I anyway? My name is Tiffany. I am a business and intellectual property law attorney, and I work with creative businesses and small businesses to help take the overwhelm out of the business side of running your business. But first, a disclaimer. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. The things I talk about in this video should not be construed as legal advice, and I always recommend consulting with an attorney who is licensed in your state. What is wholesale selling? If you have been selling directly to consumers, B2C or business to consumer, that means you have been purchasing goods or making your own goods, marking them up, and then selling them to the public via a website or a retail store. This is retail. If you're selling wholesale, that means you are selling business to business or B2B. That means you are selling goods in bulk at a reduced price to retailers. That is wholesale. These retailers then take those products and sell them to consumers at the recommended retail price. Keep in mind, you don't have to exclusively do retail or wholesale. You can do both, but there are some considerations to take into account that we will talk about a little later in this video. Why sell wholesale? There are a few different reasons, and let's list some of them here. The first thing is you have the potential for making higher revenue through fewer sales. In theory, you could sell thousands of products in just one transaction, and that helps make your month-to-month revenue a little bit more consistent. Diversify your sales avenues. If retail sales are slow one month, you have this other revenue stream that can help to balance that out. Potential for lower overhead. Instead of packaging and shipping each individual item, you're selling bulk items together as one, so you have the potential for cutting down in shipping and packaging costs. Higher brand awareness and market expansion. If you're selling your goods through a well-known retailer, you have this ability to leverage their good reputation in order to attract more customers. The question is, should you sell wholesale? Let's talk about a few considerations you might want to keep in mind before you dive in. First up is inventory. If you're a business who makes all their products in-house, or even more so if you're a creative who makes your goods by hand, you need to be prepared for large wholesale orders. Also keep in mind that it might not just be one wholesale order, you need to be ready to handle more than one large wholesale order at the same time. If you're going to need to hire employees or a manufacturer in order to make this work, you need to make sure that you are taking those increased production costs and putting that into your new pricing. I used to run a handmade leather goods business called Heist, and I made all the products by hand. So when I first started to dip my toes into wholesale, it was always really exciting when I got a wholesale order and also really stressful because I knew that those next few weeks or whatever it was that I was going to need to make those products, I needed to be prepared to spend all day, every day in the studio. So this is something you have to take into account if you are a handmade business and you want to start selling wholesale. If you're a business that works with an outside manufacturer or supplier, there are also some logistics you have to consider. Speed, shipping, pricing, and quality. There are always going to be concerns about raw material shortages, labor shortages, human error. So these are all things that are going to affect your lead time. Will you have the storage space for your inventory? If you have to get some storage space somewhere, that's another thing that's going to eat away at your profits and another thing you have to take into consideration when you set your pricing. How will you keep track of your inventory? If you're selling directly to a consumer, it's a little bit easier to keep track of what's going out and where. But if you add in another revenue stream, that's a whole other avenue that you're going to have to keep track of. Pricing. One of the most important things, and also what I think to be one of the hardest things to wrap your mind around when you start selling wholesale, is the pricing. There are many different strategies you can use to set your prices when you're selling directly to a consumer. One of the simplest and most commonly used is cost plus pricing, or sometimes it's called markup pricing. Take your material costs, add labor costs, plus shipping costs, plus overhead and marketing costs, take that total and add a percentage onto it as profit. This is your markup. This pricing model has its cons, like not taking into account competitor pricing, but it's the simplest way here to talk about wholesale pricing, so we'll use this model. Before we begin, my biggest piece of advice here is to make sure you set yourself up for success by making sure you're giving yourself a healthy profit margin. Down the line, little changes can lead to some really big stressors, and if you're not marking your stuff up enough, you are going to feel those stresses. And if you're not making enough to run a profitable business, what's the point in running the business? So with that in mind, let's talk pricing. The typical pricing structure varies between industries, but the most typical markup is 50%, so we're going to use that as an example. If we take the markup price from above, do our markup at 50% to get the wholesale cost, and then mark it up again by 50% to get your recommended retail price, RRP, or sometimes it's also called the MSRP, which is the manufacturer's suggested retail price. We set an RRP in order to keep our retail price consistent across all channels. This doesn't mean your retailer has to sell it at that price, but it is a suggested price. If your retailer feels like their market can sustain selling it at a higher rate, that's up to them to decide. For example, let's say your product has $5 in material costs, plus $20 in labor costs, plus $5 shipping, and $5 in marketing and overhead. This equals $35 in costs. If we double that, we get our wholesale price of $70, and we double that again to get our RRP of $140. Like I said, this varies by industry. So this 50% example is really common in the apparel industry, but if you're doing something like, let's say, groceries, they have a much slimmer margin at a markup of 15%. So how do we make it worth it? The goal is to sell larger quantities in order to make up for those lower wholesale prices. We can assure this happens by setting a minimum order quantity, MOQ. This is you saying in order to get that good wholesale pricing, you need to order at least 15 products or whatever it is you decide to sell. You can also set up a structure with price breaks that will incentivize buyers to purchase larger amounts for deeper price cuts. This is you saying in order to get the good wholesale pricing, you need to order a minimum of 15 products, but to get the really, really good wholesale pricing, you need to order a minimum of 30 products. You can also offer first-time buyer incentives, where you offer a lower MOQ so they can purchase a smaller quantity to test out in their store and see how it does before committing to a large purchase. Another option would be offering free shipping if they meet a minimum on their first order. Another option is to offer a bundle deal where if they purchase one item bundled with another item, they'll get some sort of break. Let's talk about a few different ways you can sell wholesale. One really important part of setting up your wholesale business is establishing your order timelines. Pre-orders is a way for your buyers to look through your line sheet or samples and place their order ahead of time. And we'll talk a little bit more about line sheets in just a minute. Lead time between when the order is placed and when it is delivered can vary by industry. So in the apparel industry, it's really common to place orders 2 or 3 seasons ahead. In other industries, it might just be a few weeks. Immediate delivery is a really good option for businesses that have a lot of product on hand and for those who have really good inventory systems in place. This probably wouldn't be the best idea for those who hand make their goods unless their turnaround time is really quick. Made to order is really common in industries like bridal, so these products aren't made until the order is placed. Consignment is my least favorite option, but it's an option nonetheless. In this model, the retailer is selling an item for the wholesaler, while the wholesaler still maintains ownership of that item. This means you send the products to the retailer, but you don't get paid until they actually sell those items. There's also drop shipping, where the retailer can place a photo of your item on their website, and once it sells, you're the one that does the fulfilling to the final customer. There are pros and cons to each one of these, but it's really up to you to decide which ones will work best for your business. The biggest thing here is you need to set clear expectations and be really committed to excellent communication with your customers. And honestly, this goes for whether you're selling retail or wholesale. And like I always say, make sure all these agreements are in writing. That's it for part 1 of the wholesale guide. We will be back next week with part 2, so come back for that. In part 2, we're going to go through each actionable step that you need to go through in order to start selling wholesale, including what you'll need to start wholesaling, how to find retailers, and how wholesale payments work. If you have any suggestions for a future video topic that you'd like to see covered, please leave them down in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. So that's it for now, and we will see you in part 2. Bye.